All right. By way of preface, some of these features are not necessarily hidden, but some of them have been introduced over the past couple of years, and so longtime clients may not have seen them. And some of these have been around for a while and are just worth probably calling out again. So let's just go ahead and get started here. Number 9 is impact analysis, which in fact there was some presentation on during our spring user group meeting, but I thought it'd be worth bringing up again. And so impact analysis is a way of detecting whether the changes you're making to a definition or a specification, or in fact any other kind of object that you maintain in the cookbook, has a potential effect on other objects, other definitions or specifications. And the way to see this is when you're working on a definition, for example, you click the show workflow link that's up in the top panel, which opens up the panel, and you click on the impact analysis link that is on the right-hand side. And once you do that, go ahead and advance the slide there. If there is a potential impact, you'll see a screen like this, you know, a series of rows and columns. So in this case, we have 3 definitions and 1 specification that might be impacted. And as a user, you can decide whether to say, yes, I think there is an impact, or no, there is no impact, or you can take no action at all. If you do decide to take some action, then you have the option to add a little bit more information. So Brian, I'll go to the next slide there, I think. And there we go, right? So I've said, yes, I think there is an impact on this particular specification, and I'm going to add a comment. The way this works is if you have multiple impacts, right, or impact indications, I think is what we're calling them inside the cookbook, those can get grouped together, all right? And so I can just choose to put this in a new group, or if I know there's already a group out there that I want this to be part of for whatever reason, I can override that as well. Once I have noted that an impact might exist, it's visible a couple different ways. It's one of the alerts that a user can see on an object. So in this case, our incoming freshman report specification actually has a number of alerts, but the top one is there's a pending impact. Once I make some changes to this report, either by editing it or by you know, taking some action that involves pressing a workflow button, I get this little pop-up, and I'm prompted to answer this question. And you know, assuming that this is in fact an impact that I've sort of noted and made some activity in response to, I could click yes here and save it, and then there will be a record of this impact having been generated and resolved. I can also go take a look at any pending impacts from within the cookbook. So let's go to the next slide, Brian. I think this is right. So in my organization menu, I can look at all of the groups, or I can look at specific indications. And when I get there, this is an example of this particular one we've talked about. So it's pending. There's also, you know, I can filter by a variety of statuses, so I could see ones that have been resolved, or I could see ones where there was no impact noted in the first place. So that's a real brief nutshell on that one. If you want a more lengthy discussion of that, you can take a look at this at the spring user group, where Scott went that in some detail. But it's a new feature we like. All right, so what's number 8? It is oh yeah, a little bit simpler. This is the ability when you are when you have created something like a definition or a specification, and you do not want to be the person who continues to be responsible for it for whatever reason, right? So I can have created it on someone's behalf, or I could maybe create it because that person wasn't around for whatever reason, or I might need to reassign somebody else, right? A person has left my institution or has left their role. So all I've got to do here is go into my workflow panel again on a definition or specification or whatever, open it up, click on the name of the version creator. This window pops up, this little modal box, and it allows me to reassign it to anybody else in any other user in the cookbook. And in this particular case, Reggie is trying to reassign this away from himself, so he gets a little notification saying, warning, if you do this, you may not be able to take any additional action. So that's a nice little ability to get something started and then put it in somebody else's sort of task list. The next feature is pretty similar. It's adding collaborators. It's done kind of the same way. Now, we've always had the ability to add collaborators on definitions. That was always out on the right-hand sidebar, but it was kind of limited in the scope and when and who could do it. Now, in this case, I open up my workflow panel. I go ahead there. I click on the little plus icon next to collaborators, and then I can choose from any user in the cookbook to add as a collaborator, and I can add as many as I need. And I can control what their collaboration looks like. So I can simply invite them to make a comment. I can give them the ability to edit, and I can even give them my role for this object in this particular stage, right? So in this case, if I want to make Stu a collaborator and I give him my role, he can not only edit it, that's what I can do, but he can press some workflow buttons as well. So it's a much more feature-laden way of adding collaborators. All right, what's number 6? It is, working on multiple items at once. So historically, you've been able to approve up to 12 definitions at a time. So we've taken that ability and expanded it in 2 directions. One is you can now work on up to 30 at a time, I think. And the other direction is we've added more than just approval. So if you go into your definition approval queue or your specification approval queue and mix and match the filters here to find the set of objects that you want to work on. So let's skip to the next stage here. The next picture, right? So here I've picked out my the definition approval workflow that I want and the stage that items are in and the action I want to take. And I don't have it shown here on the slide, but there could be, up to 30 definitions on this list here. And I can just click that approve button and approve them. I could also have chosen a different stage and a different action and sent them on their way. And there's also the ability here, by the way, to check and uncheck. So I could pick out, 25 of 30 rather than work on all of them. So that helps speed that process along. Number 5 is, this is this isn't a feature so much as it's the ability to take a feature and do some stuff that people have long wanted to do. So let's say, for example, the use case here is I have a lot of definitions that I put in one functional area, and I want them to belong to a different one. So what I can do is, in particular, this is earlier on in the process before anything has been approved, but it can happen at any time. So I can get the definitions that I want from my browse page, again, using filters and search criteria, and export them as a CSV, right? I've always got that little link on the right-hand side at the top of the browse page. Once I've got them in a CSV, I can edit them in Excel, right? So if I want to change all the functional areas, if I want to add a tag, if I want to make other changes throughout, right? I have the ability in Excel or whatever tool to sort of to apply it to a lot of different definitions at once. Right? Once my file has had those changes made, I can just import it, right? So I go to my definitions menu and I click on import. And not every user has this ability, but many do. Once I navigate to the file I want and run the preview, I will get the, assuming the preview is successful, I get something that looks like this. And then I have those options, right? One is to override existing definitions, and the other was to automatically approve if I'm a user who can do that. So, and my override options are kind of twofold, right? One is I can create a new version of an approved definition. And the other thing I can do is if it's still in a pending stage, whatever it's called, I can just replace what's there and leave it in that stage. So that is a relatively easy way to make some bulk changes to definitions.
Hey, Aaron,
and I see there's a question about this one, yeah.
Yeah, the question from Carl Greenwood is, does the definition CSV export retain formatting or stripping?
That is an interesting question. So it retains the format, right? So if you do the export and you look at the functional definition, it'll start with the p tags, and it'll include any other HTML that you might have used there, whether that's a line break or something you put in. The import can read those, and it can also work without it, right? So if you were to replace something like that, or if you wanted to put the formatting in your import file that wasn't already in the cookbook, that's you have that option. All right, Brian briefly mentioned this additional attributes feature earlier. We've now extended them to a different set of, they used to be on definitions, and now they're also on specifications. And in the enterprise license, they're also on quality rules and data systems. But these are basically custom fields that you can create up to 10 for use on definitions and specifications and so on. Again, this is done through the administrator role in the organization menu, right? Navigate to additional attributes, open it up. You can create, there's definitions, there's specifications, like I said. When you create it, you give it a name, you choose a type. I think we have 5 types available right now. One is a drop-down where you populate a list. One is a checkbox. One is could be numeric. One is just a text field. I don't remember off the top of my head what the 5th one is. I can also say whether or not this is required. And if I do make it required, then it's something a user has to fill in before saving it on whatever feature I'm working on here. On a definition, then, when I've created attributes, these are visible in the other information section, right? This is between the functional definition and the technical definition. And in this particular example, I've created an additional attribute called calculated field, and I made it a checkbox, right? And then what the user does is they check it or they uncheck it. On a specification, you'll see this out in the overview tab. So those are a way to they're like tags, but more rigorous, more robust. Although you can do a lot of different things with them. Number 3 is another feature that's introduced earlier this year, the ability to customize help texts. So throughout the cookbook now, there are a lot of places where users get some context help, right? They'll see a little eye inside a circle, and if they hover over that, they can see some text that is provided by the application. Well, you can edit those to it, or you can add additional information to those, right? So you can navigate to there from the organization menu again, choose the category you want. If you don't choose the category, you'll see, I don't know, perhaps 100 of these. So that's a way to limit down to what you want to work on. And then when you click on these, you'll see that there is, in some cases, we have 2 different set of help texts, right? So some have text that's visible when a user is viewing, and then text that is visible when a user is editing. Some just have a view text. So after you click customize, you can add information here. So you can put text in front of the what the application delivers, or you can put text after, or both. And you can also put a little emphasis phrase in. Does the next slide actually show what that looks like? Yeah, sure. So here I've got an emphasis label that I could create, which shows sort of in larger font at the top of the help, and then pre-text, meaning this could show up before whatever the application has. And then what does the next one say? Post-text, right? So yeah, you have the ability then to provide more, information for your users directly within the application, in addition to whatever other stuff you've created.
I just want to add one thing. I know we're short on time, but this feature was both accelerated and inspired by the presentation that we had, I don't know if it was 2 users groups ago, by one of the clients, where they talked about their style guide that they wrote for definitions. And the question was like, how can we, and many people after that session said, can we get a copy of that? We wanted to have a way that things like a style guide for a definition or other user-generated content could be available, while people are doing things like editing. So that style guide, you could just put, either put the text in here, or because you have the full CK editor features on this help, you could actually just have a link to it, to the style guide as part of your help now, for when you're editing a definition. So it's important. We'd love to hear the ideas that come from you so that we can add those types of things in. Right, back to you, Aaron.
All right. There's a question out there about, can we give an example of additional attributes that are useful? That would actually be a great poll question, although we probably didn't create that one.
Yeah, I mean, a common one that I think people use for some sort of security classification or internal classifications, that you might want to not use as a tag, to have more like a required field, or other things. On a specification, it maybe becomes more useful if you have something that's specific to the tool set that you're using. That gets in a little bit to the realm of spec templates and things like that, but yeah, it's sort of, many different things that people can use. So, I think for the sake of time, let's look at this next question, but let me skip to the next.
Right. Yes. Speaking of help information, we have also started to include tutorials within the Data Cookbook using a tool called WalkMe. So those are visible right when you log in, right? So when you are in the cookbook, in the lower right-hand corner, there is a little triangle that says, what does it say? Need help, right? And if you click on that, it pops up a little window with a list of tutorials, or actually not all of them are tutorials, but sort of help features. So why don't you go to the next slide and see your ideas. All right, so that's sort of what pops up. But notice there's a scroll bar here because there's more than just these 6 or 7. So the ones that have this kind of, I don't know, describe that like a speech balloon, actually run tutorials. The user's guide is a link to the guide in the cookbook. So if you go ahead and click on one of these, this starts to walk you through a tutorial. So you'll have a little text panel like this that will show up in front of the application, and it provides a certain amount of information, and then it has some navigation features. And depending on what you're doing, it may even require you to interact with the page. So it may say click here, and then once you open that up, then the tutorial will say next. The other way the tutorial will work is it's context sensitive sometimes. So if you have never created a definition in the cookbook before, but you have the right to do so, if you get to the right spot, it may just, depending on how quickly you're moving, it may pop up, say you've never created a definition, do you want to see how to do it? And so that's what that feature is. So we release new tutorials whenever we can. They're a little bit of labor intensive to create. One we just saw there is related to impact analysis. We've been working on that one for some time now. But if you have ideas for additional tutorials or to improve the ones that are out there, please let us know. All right, and then our top hidden feature, and this isn't really hidden, it's newly released or new to be released with the next update to the cookbook, which I think is scheduled for Monday. Collections are available right now in the Enterprise Edition, but now they're going to be part of the Knowledge Edition, so everybody will have them. And they're, I think, a really useful feature around organizing specifications, right? So, commonly now people have multiple worksheets or tabs on a dashboard, or they have any kind of reporting deliverable that contains lots of sub-reports. And so a collection is a way to document the relationship between the two, and also it contains some new features. I think if you look at the use cases, those are pretty self-explanatory. So you might have, like I said, a dashboard. You might have some kind of publication like a fact book or an admissions guide, or think about like a survey such as iPads or anything like that, which has, you know, A through H, and each of A through H is probably a specification, and then the whole survey itself is a collection. So another use case might be something like documenting some aspect of the semantic layer in your reporting tool, right? If you have Cognos or business objects, you have a query subject or a universe, and those are contain, you know, maybe 10 to 20 executables that a user can see, and sometimes the tool is hard to navigate or document. So the cookbook would be a place to wrap those up as collections and then allow users to read up in advance, and then probably even connect directly to them from within the cookbook. Let's go ahead and take a look at what one looks like. So this is a fact book that's documented in our demo account. So you can see that the collection is a little less detailed than a specification. We've only got 3 tabs here as opposed to the 7 or 8 you see in a spec. Overview works much the same as in a spec. The functionality tab here sort of describes you know, the way it works and what it contains, right? And what this is actually is a description of each element, and those are all linked to each other here, right? So if I click on that overview link, it jumps down further in the page to the overview section using HTML anchors. And then inside that overview, you see I link to other specifications in the cookbook. And then out on the right-hand side in the in that sidebar, right, we have a variety of features. Some of them you will have seen before, related specifications, reference definitions, and then some new features, right? So we can say which data systems are involved in this fact book. And then in the lower right-hand corner, this is a new feature where clients name tools, right? And so in this case, we have reporting tools, but a tool could be any kind of technology that's involved here. And I then can sort of see, like we said earlier, a way to sort of capture the entire stack here, right, from source system to ultimate product. Or if I have a more technical bent, I might even be capturing this entire universe, so to speak, of systems and specifications inside of a collection.